Welcome to the Racewalk section of USATF's Level 1 coaching course. Racewalking is the 400-year-old event from which modern track and field developed. It's an endurance event that takes between 6 and 300 minutes for most competitions. Racewalking is a cyclical motor skill. It's a learned movement pattern repeated continuously around 3 to 4 times every second. In the US, younger athletes race 1,500 meters up to 10 kilometers, while open athletes compete from 3,000 up to 50 kilometers. Open athletes also compete in 2 or 4-person marathon relays, which can be mixed teams. Once the technique has been learned, incremental improvements in form will continue to produce faster race times. Racewalking shares many of the characteristics of other cyclical skills, most notably swimming and classic style cross-country skiing. Racewalking is not exempt from any sports science principles. A coach needs a basic understanding of the mechanics of motion, Newton's laws of motion, and how these apply to the human body. Knowledge of exercise physiology is also important to maximally develop racewalkers. In the same way, the principles of coaching all apply. These include progression, accumulation, variation, context, overload, and recovery. Developing a training schedule with peaking goals is the same process as for middle and long distance runners. Specific adaptation is particularly important. Training responses are coupled to the exact exercise performed. Running will develop some aspects of cardiovascular fitness, but the muscles specific to racewalking have to be stressed to improve performance. Since coaching runners is well understood by many track and field coaches, let's compare 4 primary areas. Physiology, that's the development of physical fitness. Biomechanics, that's the development of movement skills. Psychology, that's the development of mental skills. And error avoidance, which is done by learning from experience. In maximal testing, Hagberg and Coyle found the same VO2 max and same max heart rate occurred in racewalking and in running. The blood lactate relationship to heart rate and percentage of max VO2 is also identical. At the same oxygen consumption rate, running and racewalking produce the same heart rate and perceived exertion, although the events produce different velocities. If you're a running coach, you can easily translate running schedules for racewalkers. Express the workload as a percentage of max heart rate or max oxygen uptake, and the amount of time at that velocity. If you set the same effort for the same time, you will produce the same training effect. For example, runners might do 5 by 1 kilometer in 3 minutes to elicit VO2 max and take a 3-minute recovery between. The same training stress for racewalkers is 5 times 3 minutes at VO2 max with a 3-minute recovery. The race walkers will cover 650 to 750 meters in this time period. If you send your runners and race walkers out at tempo perceived exertion or threshold heart rate on a path, they can all turn round at 10 minutes to complete a 20-minute tempo session. The runners will cover more distance, but there's the same training effect. A video on this topic can be reached using this QR code or URL. Race walking uses the glutes and hamstrings as primary drivers rather than the quads and hip flexors. Runners have flight times over 300 milliseconds, whereas race walkers cannot exceed 40 milliseconds. These differences reduce impact forces to less than half those in running. Race walking has a cadence similar to middle distance running, even in events that last more than an hour. Due to the straight landing leg, core strength is essential for stability. When coaching beginners, do not start with the rules. This tells athletes what not to do and inhibits learning. How to teach beginners. First, show them what they're trying to achieve. Especially useful are videos of young but skilled race walkers. The slower speed makes it easier to see their action, and young athletes react positively to viewing athletes of a similar age. Several example videos can be found on YouTube using this QR code or URL. In a typical racewalk teaching progression, we first teach posture. The overall position is upright or leaning slightly from the ankles, so as to place the body weight over the balls of the feet. The eyes look to the horizon. The shoulders remain low and relaxed throughout the arm swing, with the elbows at a constant around a 90-degree angle. Next, we teach how to position the hips for each heel strike. As the arm swings back, the hip rotates forwards. The right arm and hip action mirrors the left arm and hip action. A stationary hip drill is useful here. Standing with straight legs and the feet slightly apart, the athlete swings the hands from the sternum to just behind the shorts. The reaction force of the arm swing is used to counter-rotate the hips, keeping them parallel to the floor. Once the arm to hip coordination is mastered, the leg action is added. The key points for a beginner are landing on the heel with a straight leg close to the body and bending the knee after the leg passes the vertical. Here we see the leg action in slow motion. The lead heel lands close in front of the body with a straight leg. The leg stays straight until it is upright and then is actively bent to roll the trail foot upright at toe off. short example lesson can be reached using this QR code or URL. Racewalking is cyclical, with no distinct start point to the motion. Therefore, it is important to teach starting along with basic technique. Beginners are likely to be racing short track events and will also need to start intervals in training. The rules for starting race walks are exactly the same as for running events. As with running, the lead toes are near to, but not on or over the line. Before the start, the opposite arm and leg are forwards. Bend both knees. When everyone is still, the starter fires the gun. At the gun, the athletes gain momentum by shoving off with both legs. They drive one elbow back and the opposite leg forwards. The first heel strike must be made with a straight knee. From this point onwards, correct race walk form must be used. Judges will watch the start closely for infractions. A video on starting can be found via this QR code or URL. Beginning athletes will store the race walking motion in declarative memory. There will be a series of instructions that need to be recalled. This is a relatively slow process. With training, these instructions are consolidated in procedural memory, and the action becomes automatic, a much faster method of recall. At first, focus can only be maintained for short periods before technique deteriorates. Start out with race walking fast, but not all out, for 80 to 100 meters, with easy race walk recovery around the bends. As the skill develops, use 1-2-3-2-1 ladders with 100-meter recovery between the faster sections. After 2 to 3 weeks, the skill should be sufficiently ingrained that longer reps can be attempted, such as 300 meters fast with 100 meters easy recovery. Another important skill to teach early is the body check. At a specific marker around the track, or after receiving a judge's warning, the athlete checks technique from head to foot. Are my eyes on the horizon? Are my shoulders low and relaxed? And so on, checking elbow angle, posture, heel strike position, and leg action behind the body. After their first few races, provide a technique check. Video contains too much information for a beginner and may overwhelm them. Instead, grab a series of frames and mark 1 or 2 key points to improve. Work towards technique that is both legal and very efficient. Find flaws either through observation or by taking video and watching in slow motion. The first phase of flaw correction in any event is making the athlete aware of the flaw. Always follow this with encouragement. The flaw can be solved, and dealing with it will lead to faster times. Show and explain how the movement needs to be changed. The correction may also require stretching and/or strengthening routines. Associate the technique change with a verbal and a visual cue. This allows you as a coach to quickly remind the athlete of the correction in training or in a race if it arises again. As the athlete rehearses a technique change, instant video feedback is particularly useful. Here we see an athlete who's watching two monitors. One shows 4 views of her technique, and the lower screen shows the form of an elite race walker. If a treadmill plus camera system is not available, the coach needs to provide verbal feedback in real time. If video is recorded, share it immediately after each interval. Another method of providing feedback is to place elastic tape on the skin. In this example, the athlete can feel the tape wrinkle if they lift their shoulders too high. Some flaws are more easily understood if anatomical points are marked and video taken. In this example, neon pink tape has been applied to the right wrist and left ankle. This helps to show if the hand and foot actions are synchronized with the opposite hand and foot moving towards the ground in front of the athlete at the same instant. Treadmills have a minor effect on gait mechanics compared with overground racewalking. However, they are still a very useful way to check for left-right asymmetry. This athlete is working towards getting the trail foot vertical at toe off. A foam roller has been placed on the side of the treadmill to provide a vertical reference line, and the motion recorded in slow motion. A video on flaw correction is available on YouTube via this QR code or URL. A significant error, common in beginners, is landing on a bent leg or allowing the leg to bend before it has reached the vertical. This action can lead to disqualification. Learning the action of chipping a ball can help. A soft knee on landing can sometimes result from a protective action for sore shins. Taping can reduce the discomfort. However, the long-term solution is a course of toe lifts with 5 to 10 pounds to build up the tibialis anterior muscles. Another factor in incorrect knee action is weakness in the hip rotators. Working with an elastic band as part of core work can help. Including drills with bands in training and warm-up for races is also effective. A video on correcting knee flaws is available on YouTube at this QR code or URL. Another common flaw is opening and closing the elbow angle through the arm swing. This is corrected by wearing an elastic band on one arm during training. Don't place bands on both arms at the same time. This would remove the need to correct the position of the unsupported elbow. This QR code or URL take you to a video on correcting elbow angle errors. More emphasis on sports psychology preparation is needed for race walkers than for runners. This is because of the requirement to maintain form at all times, being continually judged, and the additional damage done by pacing errors. Setting smart goals and focusing on the process rather than the outcome in races are the keys to optimal performance. SMART goals are specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-based. Race walkers need to learn to race both by perceived exertion and also by split times. Poor pacing can lead to technique failures and slower finish times. Technique failures in turn can lead to disqualification. Better race performances result if the athlete controls their internal dialogue. Plan for pressure situations such as pacing errors, bad weather, or judging calls by providing positive phrases to be used in each case. Avoiding errors comes from experience. Learn from races that go well or go badly. Anything an athlete will do in a key race must be tested in training or in unimportant races. This includes everything from shoes to sleep patterns over the previous week, from bringing spare pins to staying properly hydrated, and so on. The rules require the race walker to not have both feet off the ground at the same time for long enough for the unaided human eye to detect. A camera can capture fractions of a second of flight time imperceptible to the eye. Experienced judges see loss of contact at around 43 milliseconds. Runners have 5 to 10 times this much loss of contact between ground contacts. Much more common amongst beginning race walkers is failure to have a straight knee at ground contact or failure to maintain that straightness until the leg is upright. Judges give the benefit of the doubt, but if they see an athlete is in danger of breaking either rule, they can show them a yellow paddle. There are paddles with an S shape to indicate the loss of contact rule or a V shape to indicate the bent knee rule. The judge will indicate the athlete by their bib or hip number, such as by saying number 7, bent knee. Yellow paddles do not cause disqualification. Prepare athletes for receiving yellow paddles. To reduce stress, explain that they're like a coaching tool. The athlete needs to acknowledge receiving the paddle and then go through a body check to correct any flaw that might be causing a legality problem. If a judge decides a race walker is failing to comply with either rule, they will write a red card recommending disqualification. Each judge may only write one red card for each athlete. If electronic communications are not in use, a card runner will carry the cards to the DQ board, which is generally about 100 meters prior to the finish line and is arranged for viewing by the athletes during the race. The recorder will put a red mark beside the athlete's number. In some events, the specific infraction may be shown with a bent knee or loss of contact symbol. In either case, the correct reaction is to body check and to then correct form. If an athlete receives 3 red cards from 3 different judges, they have fouled out and are removed from the race. This is analogous to 3 failures in a field event. If the cards come in before the finish, the chief judge will indicate the athlete must stop by showing a red paddle. Since it's possible to finish before all the red cards have reached the recorder, a post-race disqualification can occur. Coach an athlete to stop in response to a red paddle, acknowledge the chief judge, and remove their front number. Judging calls are not appealable. In races using a penalty box, which now includes all international events and some national level championships, a 3rd red card leads to a time penalty spent in the penalty box. A 4th red card will lead to disqualification. Prepare a plan with your athletes in case they receive a time penalty. Teach them to stretch and carry out a body check. They must restart the race legally and make form corrections. Select potential race walkers based on speed endurance and the ability to learn new motor skills. It's also useful if they have some endurance training background and an analytical mindset. Race walkers often have a more muscular physique than endurance runners and may have slightly wider hips and shoulder girdles. Additional race walk coaching videos, including those previously mentioned, can be reached on YouTube using this QR code or URL. That concludes the Level 1 coaching course on race walking.